All right, so now we're going to look at different types of chemical messengers, right? So 3 different pathways. So number 1, autocrine, paracrine, and then hormonal chemical messengers, right? So the first messenger we're looking at is autocrine. So autocrine, what does auto mean? So autocrine means self, right? So these are special type of cells that when they secrete certain chemical messengers, they stimulate themselves. So what does that mean? So I have like a little cell here present, and this cell begins to secrete certain proteins. So it starts secreting proteins here, right, in order to trigger some kind of activation, right? So these cells are stimulated, they're being secreted, right? And now, remember, when you look at any kind of chemical messenger, you need two actual physical features in order to generate a response. Number 1, you need a ligand, so some kind of chemical messenger, right? Some kind of cytokine, chemokine, any kind of protein, or even a steroid. And then the second thing you need is a receptor. And so the receptor, I'll put in blue here. This is where these chemicals that are being secreted, these ligands, bind, right? So these little chemicals now, because the cell has its own receptor, right? When these chemicals are being secreted now, they go and they bind to the specific receptors of the cell itself, right? So a lot of stem cells have a lot of autocrine regulation that's taking place, right, to maintain their potency, right? So what are stem cells again? They're these unspecialized cells that can become basically anything, right? It all depends on the specific lineage of cells that we're looking at, if we're looking at the special type of stem cell, all right? So you have autocrine system, then you have the second, which is paracrine. So paracrine is a little different than autocrine, right? So again, same chemical messengers are being created, right? However, when we look at a paracrine, paracrine means neighboring cell, right? So now if we have one cell here and we have another cell here, right? When this specific cell, cell 1, begins to secrete its chemicals, right? So it secretes its chemicals for binding wherever it's going. The actual receptor will be present on the neighboring cell or cell 2. Right here, right? So all of these hormones now will migrate and bind here to this neighboring cell. So cell number 1 will secrete cells, so some kind of epithelial tissue, comes in, secretes it, and the actual receptor, so the ligand will bind to the receptor on the neighboring cell, which is cell number 2. And then the third type of chemical messaging is hormones. Right? So paracrine, you have autocrine, paracrine, and then you have hormones. The difference between paracrine and hormones are almost identical. The difference between paracrine and hormone is distance. Paracrine is shorter distances, whereas hormones is longer distances, right? So if I have cell 1 here that's present, secreting all of its chemicals, right? The actual hormonal response, even though, for example, you'll have some neighboring cells here, like number 2, the actual target, if I were to, for example, draw, like, let's see, like some kind of distance, right? So the distance is going into the blood, right? And then you have cell number 3, which is, maybe 3 meters away. That receptor that's present, again, for the ligand to bind will be on cell number 3. Right? So now the hormone has to travel through the blood, right? And then finally bind to the receptors presented on cell number 3. Right? So that's the difference between the 3 different types. Majority of endocrine glands, endocrine hormones, use this pathway of the hormonal chemical messengers, right? Autocrine and paracrine majority of the time is not involved with the endocrine system. A lot of the cases is certain neurotransmitters, for example, in the nervous system that are present. But the endocrine system majority of the time uses the hormonal pathway system, the hormonal chemical messengers.